The doctors found it at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Michael Harrison lay unconscious in the ICU at Duluth Medical Center, his right arm exposed under surgical lights. What had started 3 days ago as a mosquito bite now covered his entire forearm in dark, branching lines, geometric patterns that pulsed faintly beneath dying skin. Dr. Helen Reeves stood frozen, scalpel trembling in her gloved hand. The tissue sample she'd just extracted didn't belong in any human body. The cellular structure showed organized networks, building something she couldn't name. "His white blood cells aren't fighting infection," she whispered to the attending physician. "They're constructing it." Behind the observation glass, Mike's daughter Rachel pressed her palm against the window, watching her father's body betray him in ways no medical textbook could explain. 72 hours earlier, Mike had scratched what he thought was a simple bug bite while working on his boat dock. By morning, he'd be fighting for his life and confronting a military secret buried 52 years deep. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Mike Harrison had lived in the same lakeside cabin for 40 years, watching the seasons turn over Lake Superior like pages in a book he'd memorized. At 68, his hands still knew the weight of a wrench, the grain of pine wood, the exact pressure needed to tie a fishing line. He was a man built from routine and silence. Coffee at dawn, a walk along the pier, hours spent coaxing life from the old boat engine that had belonged to his father. The cabin sat 3 miles outside Bayfield, Wisconsin, where the population never topped 900 and everyone knew your name before you knew theirs. Pine trees crowded the property line, their needles carpeting the ground in rust-colored layers. Inside, the walls held 44 years of marriage and faded photographs. Mike and Margaret on their wedding day, her in simple white, him in his dress uniform, Rachel as a gap-toothed 7-year-old holding a fish nearly as big as herself. Margaret again, silver-haired and smiling, just months before the cancer took her 2 years ago. Mike was a structural engineer by trade, retired now, but his mind still calculated load-bearing weights and stress points in everything he saw. It was easier than calculating the distance between himself and his daughter Rachel, who called once a month from Chicago with the dutiful tone of someone checking a box. She was a cardiac surgeon, brilliant, driven, and estranged in the way only family can be. The rift had started during Margaret's illness, when Rachel accused Mike of emotional absence, of treating his dying wife like a construction problem to be solved rather than a person to be held. She wasn't wrong. What Rachel didn't know, what Margaret had taken to her grave, was that Mike's silence wasn't coldness, it was protection. Some truths once spoken couldn't be unspoken, some secrets had teeth. On his bedside table sat Margaret's knitting needles, still tangled with blue yarn from a project she'd never finished. On the refrigerator, Rachel's childhood drawings curled at the edges, held by magnets shaped like strawberries. In the attic, sealed in a footlocker Mike hadn't opened in 3 decades, lay his military duffel bag from Vietnam. Inside it, a metal box he'd sworn never to open. Inside that box, the reason he'd learned to live with silence as a companion. Sheriff Tom Bradford stopped by every Thursday, had done so since high school when they'd been on the same baseball team. Dr. Helen Reeves ran the town clinic with the efficiency of someone who'd seen everything twice. Father Patrick Donnelly at St. Mary's asked Mike to coffee monthly, patient with his one-word answers. They all thought they knew Michael Harrison, widower, veteran, decent man who kept to himself. None of them knew what was sleeping in his blood, waiting. It started on a Thursday morning in late August, when the air hung thick enough to drink and mosquitoes rose from the lake in clouds. Mike was replacing rotted boards on the boat dock, his shirt already dark with sweat by 7 a.m. He slapped his right forearm without thinking, felt the mosquito crush beneath his palm, and wiped the smear on his jeans. The bite was nothing. A small red welt just below his wrist, the kind he'd gotten 1,000 times living on the water. He scratched it absently and went back to work, driving nails with the same steady rhythm he'd learned from his father 40 years ago. By noon, he'd finished the dock and driven into town for supplies. The hardware store smelled like sawdust and motor oil. Old Jimi Hendrix nodded from behind the counter. "Hot enough for you, Mike?" "Hot enough." Mike paid for wood screws and a new drill bit, scratching his arm as he waited for change. On the way home, he stopped at the cemetery. He did this every Thursday, had done it for 2 years now. Margaret's grave sat beneath an oak tree, her headstone simple granite with just her name and dates. Mike placed fresh daisies in the built-in vase, her favorite flowers, and sat on the stone bench nearby. "Rachel called yesterday," he said to the headstone. "Didn't know what to say to her, Maggie. Never do." His forearm itched. He scratched harder. "She asked if I was eating right. I said yes. She asked if Tom was checking on me. I said yes. Then we both ran out of words." The silence between him and his daughter had started long before Margaret died, but her death had made it permanent somehow. Rachel thought he'd been cold during the illness, distant when he should have been devastated. She didn't understand that some men showed love by trying to fix things even when things couldn't be fixed. Mike looked down at his arm. The welt had grown to the size of a quarter, and thin red lines were radiating outward from the center like the legs of a spider. His medical training from the war kicked in automatically. Lymphangitis. Red streaks meant the infection was traveling through his lymphatic system. He'd need antibiotics. But something about the pattern bothered him. The lines were too symmetrical, too evenly spaced, almost geometric. He drove home, took 2 Benadryl and tried to ignore it. By 3 p.m. his forearm was throbbing. By 5 he could barely hold a coffee cup. His hands trembled when he tried to grip the handle and the cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. Mike stared at his hands. They'd built houses, repaired engines, held his daughter when she was small enough to fit in the crook of one arm. Now they shook like an old man's. He was 68, but he'd never felt old until this moment. The radio on the shelf crackled with evening news. Health officials are monitoring a cluster of unusual infections in the Great Lakes region. Authorities say there's no cause for public alarm, but residents with unexplained symptoms should contact their healthcare providers. Mike turned it off. That night, he tried to call Rachel, got her voicemail. "Hi, honey, there's something wrong. Could you—" He stopped. What would he even say? "I have a bug bite and I'm scared." That wasn't something Michael Harrison admitted. "Never mind. Call me when you can." He didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw things that made no sense. Jungle thick with fog, men in white coats, needles the size of pencils, screaming he tried to forget for 52 years. He woke at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, his arm burning. In the bathroom mirror, he pulled back his sleeve. The bite had turned dark purple, almost black at the center. The red lines had spread past his elbow, branching like tree roots under his skin. And there was something else. Something that made his stomach drop. The pattern looked familiar. He'd seen it before, decades ago, on men who didn't survive. Mike grabbed his truck keys with shaking hands. The clinic opened at 7, but he'd be there at 6, waiting in the parking lot if he had to, because whatever this was, it wasn't just an infection. It was something he'd prayed would stay buried with the others. Something from a war that had never really ended. He looked at his reflection one more time, saw the fear he'd been too proud to show his daughter, too stubborn to show his wife. "Maggie," he whispered to the empty bathroom. "I think it's time to break the silence." Cynthia and Mary's medical clinic sat on Main Street between the hardware store and the post office, a single-story brick building that had served Bayfield for 40 years. Mike arrived at 6:15, his truck the only vehicle in the gravel lot. He sat with the engine running, watching the dark windows, his right arm resting on the steering wheel. The pattern had spread overnight. Dark lines now covered his forearm like a map of rivers viewed from above, all flowing toward the original bite. At 7 sharp, Nurse Linda pulled in. She was mid-50s, with kind eyes and the efficient movements of someone who'd seen everything twice. She noticed Mike immediately and walked to his truck. "Mike Harrison, you're here early." Then she saw his face. "Come inside." Dr. Helen Reeves had been Bayfield's physician for 3 decades. She'd delivered half the children in town, including Rachel, and had sat with Margaret during those final weeks when the pain medication stopped working. She was practical, direct, and unshakable, until she rolled up Mike's sleeve. Her face went pale. "Mike, when exactly did this start?" "Yesterday morning. Just a mosquito bite." Dr. Reeves said nothing for a long moment, just stared at his arm. She put on gloves, palpated the tissue gently. The skin around the bite had begun to darken, not bruising exactly, but a grayish discoloration spreading in those impossible geometric patterns, too symmetrical, too organized. "Any fever? Chills? Confusion?" "No fever. I felt off last night. Had some bad dreams." He didn't mention what the dreams contained: the jungle, the compound, the needles. Dr. Reeves pulled out her phone and took several photographs from different angles. Then she drew blood, multiple vials, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, even though Mike could see the tremor in her fingers. "I'm seeing signs of lymphangitis, possibly cellulitis, but the presentation is unusual." She chose her words carefully. "Have you been near any standing water besides the lake?" "I live on the lake." "Any exposure to chemicals, pesticides? Anything at all that might—" "Helen." Mike's voice was quiet but firm. "What is it you're not saying?" She met his eyes. "I don't know. And that scares me more than any diagnosis I could give you." She handed him a prescription slip. "Strong antibiotics. If this spreads even an inch, or if you spike a fever, you go straight to Duluth. Not here. The university hospital. Do you understand?" Mike nodded. But they both knew he wouldn't go. As he turned to leave, Linda called after him from the reception desk. "Mike, your file says you were in the service. Which branch?" He stopped. "Army? Medical Corps. Long time ago." "Vietnam? Why?" Linda glanced at Dr. Reeves, then lowered her voice. "We had another case. 2 weeks ago. Man about your age, similar symptoms. Gerald Morrison, from Duluth. Turned out he'd been exposed to something overseas. Chemical exposure, they thought. The CDC took over his care 3 days later." She paused. "Haven't seen him since." The name hit Mike like a fist to the chest. Gerald Morrison, Jerry. They'd served together at the compound outside Da Nang. Jerry had been one of the 23 who'd taken the injection and survived, one of the ones they'd sworn to silence. Mike's hands went numb. Did Morrison say anything before they took him? Just kept repeating something about being activated. Made no sense. Linda shook her head. Poor man seemed confused. Mike left without filling the prescription. He drove home on autopilot, his mind 52 years away, the compound, Captain Aldrich with his crisp uniform and dead eyes, Dr. Robert Vance, the civilian contractor with his promises of immunity boosters, protection against jungle diseases. The line of soldiers, 23 of them, including 21-year-old Mike Harrison, fresh-faced and stupid enough to volunteer for $500 extra. The injection site had been the right forearm, same place as the mosquito bite. 17 soldiers died within a week. The official report said tropical fever. Mike had been there. He'd watched Danny Cooper seize and scream, his skin turning black, vessels bursting under the surface. He'd held Jackie Martinez as the life drained from his eyes. The survivors, all 6 of them, had been pulled aside, threatened with court-martial if they ever spoke about what happened. Enhanced Immunity Protocol, they'd called it. Classified medical trial. Mike pulled into his driveway and sat in the truck, staring at his arm. The pattern pulsed faintly, visible even in daylight now. After 52 years of dormancy, something was waking up. His phone rang. Rachel's number. "Dad, I got your message." "You said something was wrong?" Mike looked at his arm, at the cabin where he'd hidden the truth for decades, at the lake that stretched to the horizon like an escape route that didn't exist. "Rachel," his voice cracked, "I need to tell you something. About the war. About why your mother protected me all those years. About why I could never—" He stopped. Through the truck window he saw a black sedan pulling up behind him. Government plates, 2 men in dark suits stepping out. "Dad? Dad, what's happening?" "Rachel, listen to me. If anything happens, there's a metal box in the attic. In my old duffel bag. The combination is your birthday. Inside there are letters, documents. You need to—" Someone knocked on his truck window. Hard. "Mr. Harrison, please step out of the vehicle." 1-800 words. Mike ended the call and stepped out of the truck. The 2 men weren't threatening exactly. Their postures were too practiced, too controlled for that. The taller one, gray at the temples, showed a badge. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Agent Dawson. This is Agent Chen. We need you to come with us. It's regarding your medical condition." "On whose authority?" "Department of Defense. We've been monitoring individuals with your service history. Dr. Reeves filed a report this morning. Standard protocol." Mike's jaw tightened. There was nothing standard about any of this. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what this is about." Agent Chen, younger and more nervous, glanced at Mike's arm. The sleeve had ridden up, exposing the dark pattern. "Sir, we're here to help. There's a facility in Duluth equipped to handle your condition. Dr. Morrison is already there, receiving treatment. Jerry's alive?" The agents exchanged a look. "He's stable. Cooperating with treatment. You should do the same." Before Mike could respond, another vehicle pulled up. Rachel's silver Lexus, driving far too fast for the gravel road. She parked at an angle and got out, still in her surgical scrubs, clearly having driven straight from Chicago the moment his call disconnected. "Dad!" She moved between him and the agents, her doctor's authority radiating like armor. "I'm Dr. Rachel Harrison, cardiac surgery. This is my father. Whatever's happening, I'm his medical proxy, and I'm not letting you take him anywhere without a full explanation." Agent Dawson's expression remained neutral. "Ma'am, this is a matter of national security. I don't care if it's a matter of presidential security. You don't take him without proper medical documentation, legal authority, and my presence. I'm a surgeon at Northwestern. I have clearance for infectious disease protocols, and I will make one phone call that puts this on the news in 20 minutes if you don't start talking." The agents hesitated. Mike felt a strange pride watching his daughter fight for him. The same fierce determination she'd shown as a child, now sharpened by years of surgical training and hard-won authority. Finally, Dawson spoke. "There was a classified medical program, Vietnam era. Some participants are experiencing delayed reactions. We're trying to help them before the condition becomes critical." "What condition?" Rachel demanded. "We can't discuss details in an unsecured location." Rachel pulled out her phone. "Then secure this location or take us both. Because he's not going alone." After a tense moment, Dawson nodded. "Fine, but we leave now." They drove in convoy, Mike and Rachel in her car, following the agent's sedan. Rachel's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, her jaw set in that stubborn line that reminded Mike so much of Margaret. "What's really happening, Dad?" Mike stared at his arm. The pattern had spread past his elbow now, dark lines visible through his shirt. "Something I should have told you years ago. Start talking." So he did, quietly, with the weight of 5 decades pressing on every word. He told her about the compound outside Da Nang, about Captain Aldrich and Dr. Robert Vance, about the injection they called an immunity booster but never explained, about the 17 soldiers who died screaming, their bodies rejecting whatever had been put inside them. "They told us it was classified medical research, voluntary. They said it would protect us from tropical diseases, make us more resilient." Mike's voice was hollow. "We believed them. We were kids." Rachel was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice shook. "Mom knew, didn't she?" "Yes. That's why she was always worried. Why you had those episodes, the nightmares, the times you'd lock yourself away." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I thought it was PTSD. I thought you just wouldn't deal with it. But she was protecting you. She was protecting both of us. From the truth. From what might happen if anyone found out." Mike looked at his daughter. "I'm sorry, Rachel, for the distance, for everything you didn't understand. I thought silence would keep you safe." "Safe from what?" "From this." He held up his arm. "Whatever they put in us, it's been dormant for 52 years. Now it's waking up, and someone wants to make sure we don't talk about it." The facility was underground, accessed through an unremarkable building on the edge of Duluth's industrial district. They descended in an elevator that went down far too long. When the doors opened, Mike found himself in a medical complex that was part hospital, part research laboratory. And there, in a glass-walled room, was Gerald Morrison. Jerry looked old. They all did now. But he was alive. His arms were covered in the same dark patterns, but more advanced, spreading across his chest and up his neck. He was conscious, sitting up in bed. And when he saw Mike through the glass, his eyes widened with recognition. An older man in a white coat approached. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Dr. Marcus Webb. I've been overseeing the Genesis Protocol survivors for the past 30 years. "Genesis Protocol?" Rachel's voice was sharp. "That's what you called it?" Dr. Webb nodded, his expression grave. "A terrible name for a terrible program. I was a young Army doctor then, assigned to observe. I couldn't stop it, but I've spent my career trying to mitigate the damage." "What was in the injection?" Mike asked. "A synthetic compound designed to alter cellular resilience. The theory was it would help soldiers survive extreme conditions, radiation, biological weapons, extended combat stress. The military wanted super soldiers who could function beyond normal human limits." Dr. Webb's face showed deep regret. "It didn't work. The human body rejected the compound violently. 17 died immediately. We thought the survivors had somehow metabolized it, broken it down. We were wrong." Rachel stepped forward. "It's been dormant, integrated into their cellular structure. What triggered activation now?" "Environmental factors. Specific parasites found in Great Lakes mosquitoes combined with something in the water. Industrial runoff, agricultural chemicals. The exact combination creates a catalyst. The compound recognizes it and begins rebuilding." "Rebuilding what?" Mike demanded. Dr. Webb pulled up scans on a monitor. Mike's blood work, cellular images that looked wrong even to his untrained eye. "Your cells are being reorganized. The compound is trying to complete what it started 52 years ago. But your bodies are too old now. The process that might have worked on 20-year-olds is killing you at 70. Rachel moved to the monitor, studying the images with her surgeon's eye. Her face went pale. This cellular degradation pattern, Dad, this is going to cause massive organ failure. How long? Based on Mr. Morrison's progression, 3 to 5 days once activation begins. Dr. Webb met Mike's eyes. I'm sorry. We've tried everything to slow it, but there has to be something, Rachel said. Immune suppressants, cellular regeneration therapy. We've tried. Nothing stops it. The compound is too deeply integrated. Mike looked at Jerry through the glass. His old friend raised a hand in greeting, his smile sad. They'd survived the war. They'd survived the injection. They'd survived 52 years of silence and guilt and nightmares. And now, it was finally killing them. How many? Mike asked quietly. How many survivors are left? 23 were discharged alive. 15 have died over the years. Natural causes, accidents. 8 remain. You and Mr. Morrison are the first to show activation. Dr. Webb paused. We've been monitoring the others, trying to warn them. But someone doesn't want us to succeed. Who? Elements within the military who still believe Genesis Protocol could work. They've been tracking survivors, waiting for activation. They want to study the process, understand why some of you are surviving longer than others. They see this as a second chance to perfect the program. Rachel's voice was ice. You mean they're going to let them die so they can take notes? Dr. Webb didn't deny it. There are people who believe the compound, properly refined, could still be the future of military medicine. They'll sacrifice 8 men to get that data. Like hell they will. Rachel turned to her father. We're leaving now. Agent Dawson stepped into view. Mike noticed he'd been standing in the shadows, listening. I'm afraid that's not possible, Dr. Harrison. Your father is a national security asset. He stays here, under observation. He's a person, not an asset. He's a carrier of classified military technology. That makes him government property. Mike felt something shift inside him. Not the compound. Something older, deeper. The part of him that had survived the war, that had protected his family through decades of silence, that had carried this burden alone for so long. I'm not property, he said quietly. I'm a witness. Dr. Webb looked at him sharply. Mike, those 17 soldiers who died, they have families who were lied to, told it was tropical fever. They deserve the truth. Mike's voice grew stronger. All the survivors who are about to die, we deserve the truth. And the American people deserve to know their government experimented on soldiers like lab rats. Dawson moved toward him. Mr. Harrison, I strongly advise... I'm tired of silence. Mike looked at Rachel. Your mother wanted me to speak. She knew this day would come. That's why she kept all those documents, all those letters from the other survivors. She was building a case, piece by piece, waiting for me to be ready. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying we tell everyone, everything. We expose Genesis Protocol, and we do it before they can silence the rest of us. Agent Dawson's hand moved to his weapon. That's classified information. Disclosure would be an act of treason. Rachel stepped between them again. Then arrest him. Arrest us both. Because the moment you do, I'm calling every news outlet in the country. And unlike you, I have nothing to hide. The standoff held for a heartbeat. 2, 3. Then Sheriff Tom Bradford walked in, flanked by 2 state police officers. Somebody want to tell me why federal agents are threatening my friends? Behind them came someone Mike never expected to see. A woman in her 40s carrying a briefcase, her face familiar in a way that made his heart stop. She looked exactly like Dr. Robert Vance. Hello, Mr. Harrison, she said. My name is Dr. Sarah Vance. I'm Robert Vance's daughter, and I have everything we need to bring Genesis Protocol into the light. 200 words. The room went silent. Agent Dawson's hand stayed near his weapon, but he didn't draw it. Sheriff Tom positioned himself between the federal agents and Mike, his own hand resting on his duty belt. The state police officers flanked the doorway, blocking any exit. Sarah Vance set her briefcase on the nearest table and opened it with deliberate calm. Inside were folders, thick with documents, photographs, and what looked like medical records spanning decades. "My father spent the last 30 years of his life documenting Genesis protocol," she said, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the room. "Every injection, every death, every cover-up. He couldn't stop what happened, but he could bear witness. And before he died 6 months ago, he made me promise to finish what he started." Dr. Webb stepped forward. "Sarah, you can't." "I can, Marcus. And I will." She looked at Mike. "My father kept records on all 23 survivors. He tracked your medical histories, your families, everything. He knew this activation would happen eventually. He just didn't know when or what would trigger it." Rachel moved closer to the table, scanning the documents. "These are classified military files. How did he get access?" "He never stopped being part of the program. They kept him on as a consultant, thinking his guilt would keep him quiet." Sarah pulled out a specific folder, marked with Mike's name. He was waiting for the right moment, for someone brave enough to speak. Mike looked at the folder, his entire life reduced to paper and photographs. What did he find? That Genesis protocol never ended. It just went underground. Sarah opened the folder, revealing documents marked with various government seals. After the initial failures, they shut down the human trials publicly, but they kept monitoring the survivors, waiting to see if delayed activation would occur. They wanted to understand the mechanism, refine it. They still do. Agent Dawson's jaw tightened. "This is classified information. Everyone in this room is now in violation." "Of what?" Tom interrupted. "Laws that protected war criminals? Because that's what this is. Human experimentation without informed consent. That's a violation of the Nuremberg Code, the Geneva Conventions, and basic human decency." Sarah pulled out more documents. "My father documented everything. The financial trail showing continued funding, communications between military officials discussing asset management. That's what they called the survivors. And this," she held up a photograph. "This is from 3 weeks ago." The photo showed Dr. Webb meeting with military officials, including someone who looked like Dawson's superior. Dr. Webb's face drained of color. "Sarah, that meeting was about protecting the survivors. Was it? Or was it about containing them until activation completed? Until you had enough data to try again?" Sarah's voice was sharp with betrayal. "You've been part of this the whole time, Marcus. Maybe you started with good intentions, but you've been helping them track these men like specimens." "That's not true." Dr. Webb looked genuinely stricken. "I've been trying to find a cure, a way to reverse the process, while they die in your facility, monitored and documented." Sarah turned to Mike. "My father's last letter said if activation began, the survivors would be isolated, studied until death, and their bodies would disappear into military research. No funerals, no death certificates, just erasure." Mike felt ice in his veins. He looked through the glass at Jerry Morrison, who was watching this confrontation with an expression of grim understanding. How many days did Jerry have left? 3? 4? And then what? Cremation in an unmarked facility? His family told he died of natural causes? Rachel's voice cut through his thoughts. "Dr. Vance, you said you have everything needed to expose this. What exactly do you have?" "Documentation of all 23 survivors. Medical records proving the experimental nature of the injections. Financial records showing continued funding. Testimony from nurses and technicians my father interviewed over the years. And this," she pulled out a small recording device, "my father's deathbed confession. Everything he knew, everything he did in his own words. Agent Dawson moved toward the table. "I'm confiscating all of this under national security." Tom blocked him. "You're confiscating nothing. This is now evidence in a criminal investigation. State jurisdiction. Sheriff Bradford, you're interfering with federal cover-up of human experimentation and murder." "Yeah, I am." Tom's voice was granite. "My father served with these men. He came home from Vietnam and drank himself to death by 50 because of nightmares he couldn't explain. Now I know why. And I'll be damned if I let you silence the ones who survived." Mike felt something breaking open inside him. Not the compound, but something older. The wall he'd built around the truth, brick by brick, year by year. Margaret had known it would crumble eventually. That's why she'd saved everything, documented everything, prepared Rachel without telling her what she was being prepared for. "Rachel," Mike said quietly. "In the attic. The metal box. The combination. My birthday. I know, Dad. I heard you on the phone." She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I went there first, before coming here. I have everything Mom saved. Letters from other survivors' families. Medical records she somehow obtained. Notes she took during your nightmares when you'd talk in your sleep about the compound." Mike's voice cracked. She knew. All these years she knew what it would cost when the truth came out. She also knew what it was costing to keep it buried. Rachel pulled out her phone. "I've already uploaded everything to a secure server, sent copies to 3 different journalists. If anything happens to any of us, it goes live automatically." Agent Dawson's face went white with rage. "You've just committed treason." "I've just saved my father's life, and the lives of 7 other men who deserve better than being lab rats until they die." Rachel's voice was steel. "You want to arrest me? Do it. I'll plead guilty in open court and use my trial to expose everything." Sarah nodded. "Same here. My father died with this guilt. I won't." Tom crossed his arms. "And I'll testify as a witness. My father's medical records show the same patterns as Mike's 20 years before he died. Genesis protocol killed him too, just slower." The standoff held. Mike could see Dawson calculating, weighing options. Exposure versus containment. Public scandal versus continued cover-up. Finally, Dr. Webb spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. "Let them go." "Dr. Webb, you don't have authority." "Yes, I do. I'm the senior medical officer on Genesis protocol, and I'm terminating it, effective immediately." Webb looked at Mike. "Your father was right, Sarah. I've spent 30 years telling myself I was helping, that I was different from the ones who started this. But I've been complicit in the silence, in the deaths. No more." He walked to his computer and began typing. "I'm declassifying everything in the Genesis database. Every file, every record. It'll take them weeks to lock it down, and by then it'll be everywhere." Agent Dawson grabbed his phone, speaking urgently to someone on the other end, but Mike could see defeat in his posture. The dam had broken. The truth was flooding out. Sarah looked at Mike. "My father wanted me to tell you something. He said you'd understand when the time came." She took a breath. "He said, tell Mike Harrison that silence was never cowardice. It was survival. But survival without truth is just slow dying. It's time to live." Mike closed his eyes, feeling 52 years of weight begin to lift. Within 48 hours, Genesis protocol became the biggest military scandal since Abu Ghraib. The files went viral. Dr. Vance's deathbed confession played on every major news network. Congressional committees announced emergency hearings. 3 generals resigned before they could be subpoenaed. And across the country, families who'd lost sons and husbands to tropical fever in Vietnam finally learned the truth. But for Mike Harrison, vindication came too late. The compound was killing him. Dr. Webb's predictions were proving accurate. His body, too old to handle the cellular reorganization, was shutting down organ by organ. His kidneys were failing. His liver showed signs of necrosis. The dark patterns had spread across his entire torso, creeping up his neck like fingers reaching for his brain. Rachel sat beside his hospital bed in Duluth, the good hospital this time, not the underground facility. She held his left hand. The right arm was too painful to touch now, the tissue breaking down despite every intervention they tried. "The Senate hearing is tomorrow," she said quietly. "They want you to testify, if you're strong enough." Mike's voice was a whisper. "Jerry?" "He died this morning, peacefully," his daughter said. He knew the truth was out. That was enough. Mike closed his eyes. 23 survivors, now 21, soon to be 20, then 19. The compound would take them all eventually, but at least they'd be remembered. At least their families would know. "The other survivors," Mike managed, "are they?" "5 are showing early activation. 3 are still dormant. Dr. Webb is working with a team from Johns Hopkins, trying to develop a treatment, but—" Rachel's voice broke. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm a surgeon. I'm supposed to fix things, and I can't fix this." Mike squeezed her hand with what little strength remained. "You fixed the important thing, the silence. That was the real poison." Sheriff Tom appeared in the doorway, hat in his hands. "Mike, Rachel." He looked older than his 62 years, the weight of his father's death and Mike's condition aging him overnight. "There's someone here. Says she needs to speak with you. I wouldn't normally allow it, but given everything—" A woman in her 70s entered, clutching a worn photograph. She had Danny Cooper's eyes. Mike recognized them immediately. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Elizabeth Cooper, Danny's mother." Mike tried to sit up. Rachel helped him, adjusting pillows. "Mrs. Cooper, I'm so sorry. I tried to save him. I was the medic. I should have—" "Stop." Her voice was firm but not unkind. She sat in the chair Tom brought over. "I've spent 52 years thinking my boy died of fever, thinking he was weak somehow, that he couldn't handle the heat or the stress. The Army told me he wasn't strong enough for war." Tears streamed down her weathered face. "But he was strong. He volunteered for something he thought would help his brothers. He was brave. And you—" She reached out, touching Mike's hand. "You carried the guilt of his death for 52 years, when it was never yours to carry. I watched him die. I couldn't stop it, because they poisoned him. Not you, them." Elizabeth pulled out the photograph. Young Danny in his uniform, grinning at the camera. "Because of you, I finally know my son was a hero. Not a casualty of weakness, but of betrayal. You gave him back to me, Mr. Harrison. His memory, his truth. Thank you." She placed the photograph on Mike's bedside table, next to the one of Margaret that Rachel had brought from the cabin. 2 young faces, frozen in time, both casualties of Genesis protocol in different ways. After Elizabeth left, Mike stared at the photographs. Margaret, who'd carried his secret and protected him. Danny, who'd died screaming while Mike held him. Rachel, who'd fought for the truth when he no longer had strength. "Dad?" Rachel's voice pulled him back. "What are you thinking?" "That Margaret was right. She always said the truth would set us free. I just never believed the cost of freedom could be so high. The cost of silence was higher. It was killing you long before the compound did." Mike looked at his daughter. Really looked at her for the first time in years without the wall of secrets between them. "I'm sorry, baby girl, for all the years I pushed you away, for making you think I didn't love you. I know you did. I just didn't understand why you couldn't show it. Because showing love meant being vulnerable, and I couldn't be vulnerable with this secret eating me alive. I was afraid if I opened up even a crack, everything would come spilling out. Rachel laid her head on his chest, careful of the pattern spreading across his skin. It did come spilling out, and you know what? The world didn't end. It got better. Harder, but better. Through the hospital window, Mike could see news vans parked below, reporters doing live broadcasts about Genesis Protocol. His story, their story, was forcing the military to account for its sins. Other classified programs were being questioned. Veterans were coming forward with their own stories of mysterious illnesses and unexplained symptoms. The silence was breaking everywhere, but it was killing him to do it. Dr. Webb entered, his face grave. "Mike, your kidney function is declining rapidly. We need to discuss end-of-life care." Mike had always known this moment would come. The compound had been a death sentence from the moment it entered his bloodstream 52 years ago. It just took this long to execute him. "How long?" Rachel asked, though her voice said she already knew. "Hours. Maybe a day." Mike looked at his daughter, at Tom standing in the doorway, at the photographs of the dead on his bedside table. "Then let's make it count." 200 words. The Senate hearing room was packed beyond capacity. Cameras lined the walls, journalists filled every available seat, and outside, protesters held signs demanding justice for Genesis Protocol victims. The Armed Services Committee sat in a semicircle, faces grave, while America watched via live broadcast. Mike Harrison wasn't there. He was dying in Duluth, too weak to travel, his organs failing one by one as the compound completed its 52-year execution. But his testimony was there, recorded the night before in his hospital room, Rachel holding the camera steady while her father spoke his final truth. Senator Catherine Walsh, committee chair, pressed play. Mike's face filled the screens, gaunt, the dark patterns visible on his neck, but his eyes were clear, determined. "My name is Michael Harrison. I'm 68 years old, a retired structural engineer, a widower, and a father. I'm also a veteran of the United States Army Medical Corps, and I'm dying because my government used me as a lab rat." The room was silent except for Mike's recorded voice. "In 1972, I was stationed outside Da Nang. I was 21 years old. A captain named Aldrich and a civilian doctor named Robert Vance told 23 of us we were volunteering for an immunity study. They said it would protect us from tropical diseases. They said it was safe. They lied." Mike's voice remained steady as he described the injection, the deaths, the cover-up, but it was the next part that broke hearts across the nation. 17 men died screaming. I held Danny Cooper while his body destroyed itself from the inside. I watched Jackie Martinez bleed from his eyes. I tried to save them. I was the medic. It was my job, but there was nothing I could do. The compound they put in us was killing them, and all I could do was watch. He paused, gathering strength. "The 6 of us who survived were told we'd be court-martialed if we spoke, so we didn't. We went home and we were silent. Some of us drank ourselves to death. Some of us ate our guns. Some of us, like me, just faded, became ghosts in our own lives." Rachel's voice, off camera, gentle. "Dad, tell them about Mom." Mike's eyes filled with tears. "My wife Margaret knew. She figured it out from the nightmares, the way I'd flinch at needles, the times I'd lock myself away. She could have left. God knows I gave her reason. But she stayed. She loved me through the silence because she understood I was protecting her. Protecting our daughter." His voice cracked. But the silence poisoned everything it touched. My daughter grew up thinking I didn't love her because I couldn't show it. My wife died carrying my secret because I was too afraid to speak. And all the families of the 17 who died, they spent 50 years thinking their sons were weak, that they failed somehow. They deserved better. We all did. Mike looked directly into the camera. "I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because 8 men are still alive, and they deserve to live their remaining days with dignity, not as classified assets. I'm here because 324 families deserve the truth about how their loved ones died. I'm here because this can never happen again." He held up his arm, the pattern visible even through his hospital gown. "This compound is killing me." But the real poison was the silence. That's what actually destroyed us. Not the injection, the lie we had to live afterward. Senator Walsh stopped the recording. The room was silent for a long moment. Several senators were openly crying. But what came next shocked everyone. Dr. Marcus Webb, the man who'd overseen Genesis survivors for 30 years, stood to testify. His voice shook as he read from prepared notes, then stopped, put them aside, and spoke from his heart. "I told myself I was helping. That monitoring these men, documenting their conditions, was somehow making amends for what we'd done to them." His hands trembled. "But Michael Harrison showed me the truth. I was just part of a longer cover-up. I prioritized classified research over human lives. I watched men die so I could take notes." He looked at the camera, knowing Mike was watching from his hospital bed. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry. I failed you. I failed all of them. And I'm done failing." Webb pulled out a thick folder. "This contains the names of every officer and official who knew about Genesis Protocol and authorized its continuation. Everyone who chose secrecy over accountability. I'm providing it all to this committee and to the Department of Justice. Let the prosecutions begin." The hearing erupted. Senators called for immediate criminal investigations. The Secretary of Defense was summoned. 3 more generals announced resignations before the day was over. But the most powerful moment came from an unexpected source. Elizabeth Cooper, Danny's mother, was given time to speak. She walked slowly to the microphone, clutching that photograph of her son. "My boy was 19 when he died. For 52 years, I thought he was weak. The Army told me he couldn't handle combat stress, that he died of fever because he wasn't strong enough." Her voice broke. "I was ashamed. I'm sorry, Danny. I was ashamed of you." She held up the photograph. "But Michael Harrison gave me the truth. My son didn't die of weakness. He died because powerful men used him as a test subject and threw him away when the experiment failed. He was brave. He was strong. And he deserved so much better." She looked directly at the senators. "Don't let this be about politics or blame or protecting the military's reputation. Let it be about the truth. Let it be about making sure no mother ever again spends 50 years ashamed of a son who was actually a hero." The hearing continued for 8 hours. 17 more families testified. Sarah Vance presented her father's complete documentation. Rachel Harrison, speaking as both a doctor and a daughter, methodically dismantled every defense of Genesis Protocol. And in Duluth, Mike Harrison watched it all. "They're listening," Rachel said, holding his hand. "The whole country is listening." Mike's breathing was labored now, his kidneys barely functioning. Dr. Webb had given him hours, not days. But he'd lived long enough to see this. The truth told, the silence broken, the families finally understanding. Tom stood at the foot of the bed. "The VFW is organizing memorials for all 23 of you, real ones, with the truth on them." Mike managed a small smile. "Danny would like that." "Mike," Dr. Webb entered, his face stricken. "There's something you need to know. We've been analyzing the compound, trying to understand why activation happened now after 50 years. Does it matter? It does, because it wasn't natural. Someone triggered it deliberately. The mosquitoes carrying the catalyst, they were released intentionally. Someone wanted activation to occur so they could study the results." The room went cold. Rachel's voice was deadly quiet. Who? We don't know yet. But there are factions within military research who never let go of Genesis. They've been waiting for this. And now they have 8 dying men to study. Mike felt something shift inside him. Not the compound, but something deeper. A final clarity. Then we're not done, he whispered. The hearing exposed the past. Now we expose the present. Dad, you can barely... One more day. Give me one more day. Because Mike Harrison had learned something in 52 years of silence. The truth was worth dying for, but it was also worth fighting for. And he wasn't done fighting yet. 1,650 words. Mike Harrison didn't have one more day. He had 6 hours. His body was shutting down, kidneys failed, liver barely functioning, heart struggling against the cellular chaos the compound had created. Dr. Webb had started palliative care, morphine to ease the pain, but Mike refused to let them increase the dose. He needed his mind clear for what came next. Rachel sat beside him, exhausted from the hearing, her surgeon's composure finally cracking. Dad, please, let them make you comfortable. You've done enough. Not yet. Mike's voice was barely audible. Webb said someone triggered this deliberately. That means there's evidence. A trail. Sarah Vance entered with her laptop. Tom right behind her. Mike, you should be resting. No time for rest. Show me what you found. Sarah hesitated, then opened her computer. My father kept meticulous records. In his final months, he noticed something. Unusual funding requests going through military medical research channels. Small amounts buried in other budgets. He traced them to a private biotech company called Sentinel Solutions. Never heard of it, Tom said. You weren't supposed to. It's a shell corporation. But the board includes 2 former Genesis protocol officers and a retired general who was Aldrich's superior in Vietnam. Sarah pulled up documents. They've been monitoring Genesis survivors for years through VA medical records. And 3 months ago, they purchased a genetics lab in Minnesota, right on Lake Superior. Mike felt ice in his dying veins. They bred the mosquitoes. We think so. The parasites that triggered activation. They don't occur naturally in that combination. Someone engineered them, released them in areas where survivors lived. Sarah's voice shook with anger. They turned you into an experiment one more time. They wanted to study activation in real-world conditions. Rachel stood abruptly. They murdered these men, deliberately infected them just to collect data. And they're not done, Dr. Webb added, entering with his own files. I've been going through Genesis records. 5 survivors are showing early activation. If Sentinel follows the same pattern, they'll release more mosquitoes near those men, more data points, more deaths. Mike tried to sit up, but his body wouldn't cooperate. The patterns had spread everywhere now, visible even on his face, creeping toward his eyes. We have to warn them. The other survivors. We've tried, Tom said. 2 won't answer calls. 3 don't believe us. They think it's another government trick. Can't blame them after 50 years of lies. Then we go public. Now, before Sentinel can stop us. Mike looked at Sarah. You said your father documented everything. Does that include their current operation? Some of it. But not enough for prosecution. We need proof they released the mosquitoes, that they knew it would kill survivors. Right now, it's all circumstantial. Mike's mind raced despite his body's failure. 52 years of silence had taught him how secrets worked, how powerful people buried evidence, how truth could be drowned in paperwork and plausible deniability, but it had also taught him something else. Guilty men always left trails because they never believed they'd be caught. Webb, Mike said, you worked with these people. You know how they think. Where would they keep the real evidence? Dr. Webb was quiet for a moment. The lab in Minnesota. If they're breeding mosquitoes, they'd need documentation, breeding logs, release schedules. survivor monitoring data. It would all be there. Then that's where we go. Rachel grabbed his hand. Dad, you can't even stand. You're dying. I know. Mike met her eyes. But I can still fight. One more time. This is insane, Sarah said. Even if we could get you there, what's the plan? Walk in and ask for their files? Tom crossed his arms, a familiar, stubborn look on his face, the same one he'd had when they were teenagers making bad decisions. Who said anything about walking in? 4 hours later, Tom's police cruiser pulled up to Sentinel Solutions facility on the outskirts of Duluth. The building was unmarked, surrounded by chain-link fence, security cameras on every corner, a biotech lab that did legitimate work as cover for something darker. Mike lay in the back seat, barely conscious. Rachel had protested every step of this plan, but finally agreed when Mike pointed out the simple truth. He was dead either way. At least this way, his death might save the others. Security checkpoint ahead, Tom said. Everyone ready? Sarah sat in the passenger seat, wearing a white coat with a fake ID badge Webb had provided. Ready as I'll ever be. The guard at the gate was young, bored. Tom rolled down his window. Sheriff's Department, we got a call about suspicious activity in the area. Need to do a quick check of your perimeter. The guard frowned. Nobody called us about standard procedure, unless you want me to come back with a warrant and really dig into things. Tom's voice carried just enough authority. The guard hesitated, then waved them through. Make it quick. They parked near the back entrance. Rachel helped Mike out of the car. He could barely walk now, his legs failing along with everything else. She supported most of his weight, her strength surprising him even now. Service entrance, Sarah whispered, pointing to a door with a card reader. I have my father's old access code. It might still work. It did. The door clicked open and they slipped inside. The facility was quiet, most staff gone for the evening. They moved through sterile hallways, Sarah navigating from memory of blueprints her father had acquired. Finally, they reached a secured lab door marked Research Division, authorized personnel only. This is it, Sarah said. The breeding lab should be inside. Tom tried the door, locked. Now what? Rachel surprised them all by pulling a lockpick set from her pocket. At their stares, she shrugged. I dated a locksmith in med school. You learn things. The lock clicked open in 30 seconds. Inside, the lab was everything they'd feared. Rows of containment units holding mosquitoes. Computer stations with monitoring software. And on the walls, maps, detailed maps showing Genesis survivor locations marked with dates and annotations. Release schedule, Phase 1, read one document on the nearest desk. Listed below were names. Mike's was at the top, marked Activated, Day 1. Gerald Morrison was second, Activated, Day 3, Deceased, Day 12. Below that, 5 more names with future dates. 5 men who would be infected next, if Sentinel's plan continued. Sarah photographed everything with shaking hands. Tom recorded video on his phone. Rachel found a file cabinet and began pulling records. Breeding logs, infection protocols, mortality projections. They knew, Mike whispered, leaning heavily against a table. They knew we'd die. That was the point. Kill us off, collect the data, refine the compound for the next generation. A voice from the doorway froze them all. Not quite, Mr. Harrison. A man in an expensive suit stood there, flanked by 2 security guards. He was 60s, military bearing, cold eyes. I'm Dr. Alan Graves, Sentinel Solutions CEO, and you've misunderstood our mission entirely. Misunderstood? Rachel's voice was fury. You infected my father. You murdered Gerald Morrison. We completed their sacrifice, Graves interrupted calmly. Those men volunteered for Genesis protocol. They knew the risks. They were lied to. Tom moved his hand toward his weapon. Were they, or were they soldiers who understood that some knowledge requires sacrifice? Graves stepped further into the lab. The compound in their blood is the key to human enhancement. Cellular regeneration, extended lifespan, immunity to disease. Your father and the others, they're pioneers. Their deaths give humanity a future. Mike felt something break inside him. Not his body, but the last shred of doubt about what needed to happen. "You're right about one thing," Mike said, his voice stronger than it had been in hours. "Some knowledge requires sacrifice, but it should be willing sacrifice, chosen sacrifice." He looked at the compound equipment, the Mosquito containers, the computers full of damning evidence. Then he looked at Rachel. "Baby girl, I need you to get everyone out, now!" Rachel's eyes widened. "Dad, what are you—" "Trust me. One last time." Mike pulled her close, whispered in her ear, "I love you. I'm so proud of you. Tell your children about their grandfather. Tell them the truth. All of it." "Dad, no." But Tom was already pulling her toward the door, understanding what Mike intended. Sarah grabbed her files and followed. Graves moved to stop them, but Mike grabbed the nearest Mosquito container and smashed it. Engineered insects scattered. Guards backed away instinctively. "Go!" Mike shouted. They ran. Graves stared at Mike, finally understanding. "You can't destroy this. The research, the data, it's backed up, secured." "I don't need to destroy the data," Mike said. "I just need to destroy your credibility, and I'm about to do that in the most public way possible." He pulled out his phone, the one Rachel had set up to live stream to multiple news outlets, the one that had been recording everything since they entered the building. Graves's admission, the maps, the evidence. 50,000 people were watching live. By morning, it would be 50 million. "My name is Michael Harrison," Mike said to the camera. "I'm broadcasting from Sentinel Solutions in Duluth, Minnesota. Behind me is the lab where they bred the mosquitoes that murdered Genesis Protocol survivors. Dr. Graves just confessed on camera. The evidence is everywhere." He panned the phone across the lab. "They thought they could silence us one more time. They were wrong." Graves lunged for the phone. Mike didn't resist. He didn't need to. The broadcast was out. The truth was told. As guards grabbed him, as Graves screamed orders, as sirens began to wail outside, Mike smiled. The silence was broken. Finally, completely, irrevocably broken. 1,650 words. 6 months after Michael Harrison's final broadcast from Sentinel Solutions, the world had changed in ways both profound and quietly revolutionary. The live stream had been viewed over 200 million times. Dr. Alan Graves and 4 Sentinel executives were indicted on charges of voluntary manslaughter, conspiracy, and illegal human experimentation. 3 members of Congress resigned after their connections to continued Genesis funding were exposed. The Department of Defense announced the largest internal review in its history, examining every classified medical program dating back to World War II, but those were just headlines. The real change happened in living rooms and hospital wards, at kitchen tables and veteran service centers, in the thousands of small moments when silence finally broke and truth came flooding through. Mike Harrison had died that night in the Sentinel lab. His body, pushed beyond endurance, had given out moments after FBI agents stormed the building. He'd collapsed with his phone still in his hand, still broadcasting, Rachel's name on his lips. They'd given him a military funeral with full honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Rachel had accepted the flag, and this time there was no classified cover-up, no lies about tropical fever. His headstone bore the truth. SGT Michael Harrison, Genesis Protocol survivor, truth teller, beloved father. Silence was never his defeat. It was his burden. He laid it down for all of us. Rachel stood now in that same cemetery 6 months later, talking to her father's grave the way he used to talk to her mother's. "I brought someone to meet you, Dad." She looked at the woman beside her, Dr. Sarah Vance, who'd become more than a colleague in the months since that terrible night. "We're moving forward with the Harrison-Vance Protocol. That's what we're calling it. A treatment program for the remaining survivors. 5 Genesis Protocol veterans remained alive. The compound in their blood was still active, still dangerous, but now there was hope. Real research, ethical research funded by the reparations settlement the government had been forced to pay. We can't cure them," Rachel continued, "but we can slow the progression, give them years instead of days. One of them, James Wilson, he's going to walk his daughter down the aisle next month. Because of you, Dad, because you refused to die quietly." Sarah placed flowers on the grave, daisies, like the ones Mike used to bring Margaret. "My father would be proud of both of you. The silence he couldn't break in life, you shattered in death." They walked together through Arlington, past rows of white headstones. So many soldiers, so many secrets, but fewer now. The Genesis Protocol exposure had opened floodgates, other veterans coming forward with stories of mysterious illnesses, unexplained experiments, decades of military medical abuse finally seeing daylight. "How's the memorial coming?" Sarah asked. Rachel smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed in months. "It's beautiful. Wall with all 347 names, the original subjects, plus the ones who died later from complications. Danny Cooper's mother helped design it. She wanted every family to have a place to grieve properly." They reached Rachel's car. Before getting in, she looked back at her father's grave, visible in the distance. "I finally understand what Mom was trying to tell me," Rachel said quietly. "All those years I was angry at Dad for being distant, for not opening up. I thought he didn't love us enough to share his pain, but it was the opposite. He loved us so much that he carried that poison alone, trying to protect us from it. He was wrong, though," Sarah said gently. "The protection became its own prison." "I know. That's why I'm not making the same mistake." Rachel pulled out her phone, showing Sarah an email draft. "I'm writing a book. About Dad, about Genesis, about all of it. But also about what silence costs. What truth costs. How to choose which price to pay." "What are you going to call it?" "The Weight of Silence," with a subtitle, "One Daughter's Journey to Understanding Her Father's War." They drove back to Duluth, where Rachel had permanently relocated. She'd taken a position at the university hospital, heading up the new Veterans Medical Ethics Department, a program created specifically because of Genesis Protocol, designed to prevent such abuse from ever happening again. The Harrison cabin on Lake Superior had been transformed. Rachel lived there now, but it was no longer a monument to isolation. Tom Bradford stopped by most evenings. Sarah Vance was a frequent guest. Elizabeth Cooper, Danny's mother, visited monthly, bringing her grandchildren to hear stories about the grandfather they'd never met. And every Thursday, without fail, Rachel visited 2 graves, her mother's in Bayfield, her father's in Arlington. She talked to them both, told them about her life, about the changes their combined sacrifice had created. But it was what happened in small-town America that truly honored Mike Harrison's legacy. In a VFW hall in Wisconsin, Tom Bradford stood before a room full of veterans. Some were Vietnam-era like Mike had been. Others were younger, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. All of them carried burdens they'd never learned to name. "Michael Harrison was my best friend," Tom began, "and for 52 years I didn't know him at all, because he was carrying a secret that was killing him, and he thought silence was strength. He thought protecting us meant suffering alone." The room was quiet, attentive. "He was wrong. And he'd want me to tell you, you're wrong too if you're doing the same thing." Tom's voice cracked. "My father did it. Drank himself to death at 50, never told us why. Mike did it. Pushed away everyone who loved him. How many of you are doing it right now? Hands slowly rose across the room. Dozens of them. The military taught us to be tough, to handle things, to never show weakness. Tom looked at each face. But silence isn't strength. It's slow suicide. Mike Harrison proved that. He died breaking his silence. But he lived longer than he should have because he finally spoke. An older veteran in the back stood. What if the things we carry aren't worth speaking? What if they'll just hurt the people we love? Then they'll hurt you instead. And eventually, that pain spreads anyway, just in ways you can't see or control. Tom pulled out a card, held it up. This is the new VA hotline. It's anonymous, it's confidential. And it's staffed by people who understand that some truths are hard to speak. But every single person on that line will tell you, speaking is better than dying with it locked inside. The meeting ended with something unprecedented, a collective decision to break silence. Every veteran in that room committed to telling one truth they'd been carrying to a spouse, a child, a friend, a therapist, just one truth to start. Because Mike Harrison had taught them, the first crack in the wall of silence is the hardest. After that, the rest begins to crumble. In Portland, Oregon, Claire Bennett, the grandmother who'd survived Genesis protocol activation, sat with her granddaughters, ages 8 and 10. "Did you really almost die, Grandma?" the younger one asked. "Yes, sweetie, I did." "Because of the mosquito? Because of men who lied to me 50 years ago?" "But I survived because another man told the truth." Claire showed them Mike's photo from the memorial service. "This is Michael Harrison. He saved my life by refusing to die quietly." "Was he a superhero?" the older granddaughter asked. Claire thought about it. "No. He was just a man who learned that silence could be more dangerous than any weapon. And when the time came, he chose to speak, even though it cost him everything." "That sounds like a superhero to me," Claire smiled. "Maybe you're right. Maybe the real superpower is choosing truth when lies would be easier." Back in Duluth, in the University Hospital, Rachel Harrison sat with James Wilson, one of the 5 surviving Genesis subjects. He was 70 years old, the compound still active in his blood, but the treatment protocol was working. He had time. "Your father saved my life," James said. "I want to do something to honor that, but I don't know what." "Live," Rachel said simply. "Live loudly. Tell your story. Let people see that survival is possible, that truth doesn't have to destroy you, it can free you." "I haven't spoken to my son in 12 years, since the divorce, since I pushed everyone away." "Then start there. Break your silence with him." James was quiet for a moment. Then, "What if he won't listen?" "My father thought the same thing about me, thought I'd hate him if I knew the truth. But the truth, even the hard truth, gave us 6 months of real connection before he died. 6 months where I finally understood him. Isn't that better than 12 years of silence?" That evening, James called his son for the first time in over a decade. The conversation was awkward, painful, full of years of hurt, but it was honest. And at the end, his son said, "I don't forgive you for everything, Dad. Not yet. But I'm willing to listen now." It was enough. It was a beginning. Across America, the Genesis Protocol scandal had sparked a national conversation about the cost of silence. Not just in military families, but everywhere. Couples who'd stopped talking started again. Parents reached out to estranged children. Veterans began sharing burdens they'd carried for decades. It wasn't miraculous. It wasn't easy. Many conversations went badly. Many relationships couldn't be salvaged. But the trying, the speaking, the breaking of silence, that was Mike Harrison's true legacy. On the 1-year anniversary of his death, Rachel stood at his grave again. This time she wasn't alone. Elizabeth Cooper was there, and Sarah Vance, and Tom Bradford. The 5 surviving Genesis veterans came, some in wheelchairs, all of them alive because Mike had spoken. And there, standing quietly at the back, was a young woman Rachel didn't recognize. "Can I help you?" Rachel asked gently. The woman's eyes were red from crying. "I'm Amy Graves." Alan Graves's daughter. Rachel stiffened. The man who'd orchestrated her father's murder. "I know you have no reason to listen to me," Amy continued quickly. "But I needed to come to tell you—" Her voice broke. "My father lied to me my whole life. Told me he was doing important medical research, saving lives. Your father's broadcast showed me the truth. About Genesis, about the murders, about everything. Why are you here? Because I turned him in. I gave prosecutors files he'd hidden at our house. Evidence he thought he'd destroyed." Amy looked at Mike's grave. "Your father's truth saved those 5 men. But it also saved me. From becoming like my father. From living my whole life believing lies." Rachel felt tears on her cheeks. He would have liked knowing that. That truth could save even the children of liars. Amy placed flowers on the grave, not daisies, but forget-me-nots. "I'm studying to be a bioethicist now. Someone has to make sure this never happens again. I figured it should be someone who understands what happens when science forgets humanity." As the sun set over Arlington, Rachel stood surrounded by people her father had saved, not just from Genesis protocol, but from silence, from lies, from the slow death of unexpressed truth. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, "for finally letting us in, for showing us that love isn't just protection, it's trust. Trust that we're strong enough to handle the truth. Trust that we'll choose connection over comfort." The last light caught on his headstone, illuminating the final line. He laid it down for all of us. And in that moment, Rachel understood completely. The burden her father had carried wasn't just his own pain, it was the weight of believing he had to carry it alone. He'd spent 52 years protecting people from a truth they had the right to know, carrying poison that infected everything he touched. His final act wasn't just exposing Genesis protocol, it was showing everyone, veterans, families, anyone carrying unbearable silence, that speaking truth was an act of love, not betrayal. That trust was stronger than protection, that the people who love you deserve the chance to love all of you, even the broken parts, especially the broken parts. As they left the cemetery, Rachel thought about the book she was writing, about the hundreds of letters she'd received from families who'd finally started talking, about the veterans who were seeking help instead of suffering alone. Mike Harrison had been one man, dying from a 52-year-old lie, but his truth had become a lifeline for thousands. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop protecting people from reality and start trusting them with it. Sometimes love means laying down your burden and letting others help you carry it. Sometimes the silence we think keeps us strong is actually what's killing us. And sometimes, just sometimes, one man's truth can crack open a world that desperately needed to hear it. A message for you. If you're between 55 and 68, you've lived through wars and peace, through joy and loss, through decades of learning what strength means. Maybe you've carried burdens like Mike Harrison did, secrets from service, pain from loss, regret from choices made or unmade. Maybe you've believed, like he did, that protecting your family meant suffering in silence. But here's what Mike's story teaches us. The people who love you are stronger than you think, and they'd rather walk through hard truth with you than live comfortably beside a stranger. Silence might feel like sacrifice, but it's actually theft. It steals your authentic self from the people who deserve to know you. Mike Harrison waited 52 years to speak. He got 6 months of real connection before he died. Don't wait. The truth may be hard, but the love waiting on the other side of honesty is worth every difficult word. Your family doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present, real, vulnerable, and human. What truth have you been carrying alone that your family deserves to share with you? And if Mike's story moved you, what's one conversation you've been avoiding that you're finally ready to have? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the permission someone else needs to finally speak their truth.